Hello and welcome today in Estonia. We are in Tallinn and I have the honor to be with Colonel Frédéric. Hello, Colonel.
Hello.
You're in charge of the ground army for Europe, is that right?
So, almost no. Actually, I'm the Chief of Staff of the Land Command for Europe and who exercises operational control of a number of missions on the eastern flank that are delegated to him by the Armed Forces staff. This is something new for the Army, but it succeeded an existing articulation called the Command Post of the National Contingent Command for National Contingent Command, and which was responsible for controlling the proper use of French terrestrial forces that are deployed as part of NATO or of the European Union on the Eastern Front. This CTE took over its missions and was inflated with a certain number of other missions to ensure coordination, coherence, the best synergy of efforts, since all that has a lot of logistics on our flank, and again ensure that the use of forces deployed there is in compliance with the mission that has been granted to them by our Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces. When we talk about the flank,
East? Romania, up north, or the Black Sea, etc.
So it's on the responsibility area, which is that of the Command for Europe, as it was set by the CPCO. It's indeed continental Europe, excluding Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. Up to the entirety of the forests of the Benelux countries, from the Gulf of Finland all the way to the Eastern Mediterranean.
We will talk about before 2022. Before 2022, we have the Warsaw Agreements. That is to say, we are already beginning to prepare to be present for a form of reassurance for countries that border Europe.
Yes, indeed. This is a historic action of the French armies within a number of different postures, including the very well-known one for our comrades in the Air Force of the Enhanced Air Policy, which consists of contributing within NATO structures to the coherence, determination, posture of the alliance to deter and defend, that is to dissuade and defend the flank of the alliance against a threat that inevitably everyone saw coming.
Of course, but as much for the maritime and aerial aspects, we see very clearly that the Russians for years are grazing the borders, even somewhat violating the airspaces. But what threat was he conveying once again before 2022? What threat did we see to the earth from Russia or Belarus?
It's an exercise, it's a somewhat difficult question, but it's also an extremely complex anticipatory exercise. The alliance's stance should be neither escalatory nor naive. And for this, a certain number of articulations have gradually been made. These stances, of course, shifted in 2022 with the illegitimate Russian invasion of Ukraine, necessitating much more pronounced reassurance and deterrence postures on the alliance's flank than before, in order to guarantee determination, to demonstrate this determination at all times to NATO's adversary, since Russia has shown itself to be an adversary of NATO in this area. It's them
who have defined themselves as such, there is no doubt. How many men are we talking about and for what kind of mission?
So, the Commissioner for Europe has under his charge the operational control or command of national accounting and the support of about 2,000 to 2,500 people with staff that fluctuates depending on the different phases of reinforcement that can be conducted.
We're talking just for the army, 2,500 people on the Eastern Front.
Absolutely, distributed from north to south with two different objects. So there's the alliance as NATO, but there are also actions led under the mandate of the European Union. We may return to that later. For the alliance's postures, two main sites. Here, Estonia, which justifies our presence today with participation in a forward brigade, a FLF brigade whose cadre nation is armed by our partners and our British friends, to which we are a contributing nation through the Lynx device. Further south, however, in Romania, this time it is France who, in Romania, within a Romanian multinational division, France is the cadre nation of the same FLF brigade structure, with a much more robust battle group and a slightly more expanded device. Counting a little less than 400 people here in Estonia and in Romania, including support, we are closer to 1,500.
So are the missions armored vehicles men, infantry participating in exercises or who in any case take position? Or do we also have actual missions, air defense systems that are going to be deployed?
So indeed, in Romania in particular, other multi-environment, multi-field structures are deployed, some of which unfortunately cannot be discussed since they remain confidential. But there is a posture of contributing to the general safeguarding of the alliance, both in detection and in information gathering, beyond the mere posture of prepositioned troops, training to ensure the interoperability of all contributing nations and the proper execution of plans in accordance with NATO orders. So a rather wide contribution from the French army.
Here, I am lucky to be deployed with parachutists who have come here to reinforce as part of a rapid build-up at the request of the Estonians in the context of this exercise. Is this type of exercise common, or is it actually very punctual and represents our ability to get involved more quickly if necessary?
So, some reinforcement exercises or training for interoperability purposes are conducted frequently both in Estonia and in other eastern flank countries. And the ability to airlift is frequently trained with other contributing nations of the alliance. On the other hand, this action that you came to meet is extremely specific, both in its constitution, its form, and its general framework. There is both the participation in a form of signaling to the adversary of the alliance's determination to be reactive and to guarantee the safety of each of the NATO members. And so here in Estonia, it is under the title of reinforcement by the alliance that the French paratroopers you mentioned have been deployed. There is also a form of more global signaling by registering in the Baltic space and not only in Estonia, since PICNE, this exercise that will be conducted with our British and Estonian partners, follows a number of other major alliance exercises. Before us, Freezing Winds, which is an air maritime exercise in the Baltic Sea with a lot of ships and a large number of contributing nations. And previously, a phase that was conducted in Finland for interoperability and fire capability training in depth. So the whole of these sequences aims to both demonstrate this determination and this great coherency of operational objectives for the benefit of the alliance, to contribute to reassure our Estonian partner about the French commitment and determination to meet its responsibilities, as it has undertaken to do within the alliance more broadly, and then participate, especially as a contributing nation, to this determination of the alliance under NATO command here in Estonia. I remind you that here in Estonia, the operations area is under the responsibility of the Joint Force Command of Bronsum, and so PIKNE is placed under this global umbrella we call a vigilant activity under the command of the Joint Force Command Bronsum.
So here we are talking about the land dimension of these exercises for now. Tomorrow I can board a national Navy ship. That means it's still a multi-environment, multi-field Navy air exercise. Land.
Yes, indeed, this is also a novelty, especially for the Land Commander for Europe, to enter this multi-environment, multi-field, since the whole of this PICNE exercise was planned with our comrades from CAPCODA, so the Air Army Operations Command, to synthesize, also our comrades from Chief Command for the Atlantic, the Chief Command for the Atlantic, to articulate different forces in this Estonian space, a Franco-Estonian maritime group, the participation of the EAP, which is deployed in Lithuania, and within which France participates at the level of, if I remember soberly, of 4 gusts. And then to plan all of these interactions to give a very interarmed, very multi-domain character with the alliance. So really something very new and very interesting, quite complex to organize, but very conducive to exchanges between our 3 components. So it's extremely virtuous. The exercise that complements the operational posture, as you mentioned earlier, of our joint tactical subgroup, which ensures an alert within the defense plans of the alliance here, and thus contributes to the real collective posture against our adversary. And then, in addition to this NATO device that we just mentioned, a small somewhat exotic structure, if I could use this adjective, which is that of the Light Infantry Company, which is a small company of just over 150 packs, which works in a bilateral Estonia-France context with the Estonian Defense League, which is the reserve organization of Estonian defense on knowledge sharing know-how in these very demanding environments that are the cold environments in Estonia and around technical know-how to work on combat in depth in a very, very free and very bilateral way. And for us, it allows us
to test our equipment in real conditions, possibly using Serval or more recent materials. Are they also deployed here?
Indeed, it's also a real laboratory. So be careful, all these materials that have been deployed were, in their qualification phase, tested in very demanding environments.
Yes, but between the test and the operations?
And there you have it. We all know making the materials last on site under very demanding conditions and in a slightly freer framework reveals some areas for improvement. And that is the case today with the Serval, as you mentioned, which was deployed a few weeks ago in Estonia and whose first version will be tested in use on the territory. It's a very demanding environment, once again, because the geography of Estonia is not simple. The terrain is complex, very muddy in the warm season, and extremely compartmentalized and harsh in the winter season. So an extraordinary space for these new materials, which are also an opportunity to be presented to our alliance partners who are on the lookout, as was the case, for example, for the Caesar capability, for operational, effective, somewhat combat-proven capabilities which the army can have.
And we saw that Belgium clearly chose the bet to have exactly the same equipment as France. Why not the Baltic countries? Why not? A final point on interoperability. You've talked about it a lot. We work with our allies. Do rotations include Germans, Spaniards, Portuguese, and other nationalities that contribute to the melting pot and collaborate here? Or is it mainly framework nations and major countries that find success in this environment?
So it's very heterogeneous. You have on the east side a certain number of FLF brigades that are articulated very differently depending on the framework nation and according to the agreement with the host nation. France has chosen in Romania to have a very homogeneous framework nation with a key contributor, which is Belgium, which is somewhat the operational conclusion of our CAMO partnership. And then very recently, a Spanish contribution within this structure. And ultimately, that's the whole challenge of interoperability. It's about seeking interaction with many partners to ensure the best interoperability. But there is a threshold beyond which it is contrary to operational efficiency. And so all of this is a bit up to each nation's discretion. In Romania, France, as I was telling you, made this choice of a rather homogeneous composition. Here it's also the case with a British framework nation and a fairly robust French contribution. On the other hand, in the other Baltic countries, you have FLF brigades, which are much more heterogeneous and consequently pose a number of other difficulties. But again, no nation has the same policy, the same capacity, or the same willingness to commit robustly within a framework nation. And so each time it's the subject of complex agreements. But there is no frozen NATO model in terms of compositions and partners. What is certain is that this interoperability is a real challenge, a human challenge above all. Knowing how to work together, being stronger together, as the NATO motto says, but also a technological challenge with weapon systems that must be interoperable, that must exchange data. We know and see it today with the conflict in Ukraine, a rapidity of data exchange is one of the conditions for success to ensure the response or the attack in depth. So unfortunately, these issues are not simple for a whole range of capacity reasons, different fields, but NATO is watching over it. And a silo is traced to join interoperability bricks at different levels and ensure the highest efficiency of the tools.
So, to be clear, the goal is to be able to rapidly increase power in inter-services, in inter-allied, in case the Russian threat became more intense?
Indeed, this is part of those drills to implement the reactivity postures to guarantee and demonstrate the alliance's determination to adopt a more robust, defensive posture. I hope that your
presence will be sufficiently available.
We all hope so. Stronger together.
So, O'Hale, a big thank you for this exchange.
Thank you very much for having me. We hope
that you enjoyed it, and we'll see you very soon.